The family photo in Sarah Kim's wallet felt like a lie now. She sat in the Family Feud waiting area, staring at the faces she'd called family for 26 years, wondering if anything about her life had ever been real. Her hands shook slightly as she touched the adoption papers folded in her purse, documents that had shattered everything she thought she knew about herself. "You sure you're ready for this?" her sister Jessica asked softly. Sarah nodded, though her eyes held the confusion of someone whose entire identity had been rewritten overnight. This was supposed to help her feel normal again, but nothing felt normal anymore. The Kim family from Seattle had been selected after Jessica submitted their application. It was her attempt to help Sarah reconnect with the family that had raised her, to remind her that blood didn't define love. The prize money was secondary to healing the rift that secrets had created. Steve Harvey's voice filled the studio as the cameras prepared to roll. The energy was infectious and celebratory, designed to make families feel united and strong. But Sarah carried the weight of knowing her family wasn't really her family at all. She wore a simple gray sweater that her mother had bought her for Christmas. The same mother who had waited 25 years to tell her the truth about her birth. Every gift, every memory, every moment of love now felt tainted with deception. The game began with its usual excitement. The Kim family faced the Rodriguez family from Texas in what should have been a joyful competition. Steve worked his magic, drawing laughs and creating those moments of connection that made the show special. Sarah stood at the end of her family's podium. She tried to participate when the cameras focused on her, but every question felt loaded now. Who was she really? What did family mean when it was built on a lie? "Survey says," Steve announced as the first round progressed. The Kim family was doing well, their answers lighting up the board with encouraging frequency. Jessica kept glancing at Sarah, hoping to see some spark of the sister she'd grown up with. The studio lights were bright and welcoming. For most contestants, they represented warmth and possibility. For Sarah, they felt exposing, as if everyone could see that she didn't belong anywhere, not even with the people who had raised her. During a commercial break, Steve worked the audience as he always did. His natural charisma filled the studio, making strangers feel like family. He noticed Sarah immediately, standing quietly while celebration happened around her. There was something in her posture that caught his attention, the way she held herself apart from her family, like someone who had discovered they were living someone else's life. Steve had learned to read people over decades of television, and Sarah was questioning everything. "You doing all right over there?" Steve asked during the break, walking toward the Kim family podium. Sarah managed a weak smile that carried more sadness than joy. "Just trying to figure out where I fit," she replied softly. Jessica stepped closer to her sister protectively. "She's going through a tough time right now," she said, but her tone carried guilt that Steve immediately recognized. This family was dealing with something that ran deeper than normal stress. The cameras came back on. Steve returned to his position, but his eyes kept drifting to Sarah throughout the next round. Her family was winning, but she seemed disconnected from their success, present but lost somewhere inside herself. The fast money round arrived. Jessica went first and scored 168 points. The family needed only 32 more points to win the $20,000, money that could help but wouldn't heal what really mattered. Sarah stepped up to the podium. Her family cheered behind her, but she barely heard them. The bright lights felt overwhelming, the studio audience vast, the pressure mounting in ways that had nothing to do with any game show. "All right, Sarah," Steve said, his voice carrying its usual warmth. "You need 32 points to win $20,000 for your family. You ready?" She nodded, though her hands trembled as she gripped the podium. The questions began with familiar rhythm. "Name something people inherit from their parents." "Money," Sarah answered automatically, though the word felt hollow. She had inherited nothing because these weren't her real parents. "Name something families share." "Traditions." "Name something that defines who you are." "Your name." Each answer felt like a knife twist. Her name wasn't real. Her traditions weren't hers. Her inheritance was built on lies. Name something that never changes about a person. Sarah hesitated, staring at Steve with growing panic. What never changed? Everything about her had changed when she learned the truth. DNA, she said finally, though the word came out broken. Final question, Sarah. Who are you really? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Sarah's face went completely white as she stared at Steve. The carefully maintained composure she'd built over the past year began cracking like ice under pressure. The studio waited. Her family waited. But Sarah couldn't speak because the question had reached into the core of her identity crisis and torn it open. She had no idea who she was anymore. Sarah started, then stopped. Her breathing became shallow as the familiar signs of panic began rising in her chest. The bright lights suddenly felt like interrogation lamps, the audience like a jury waiting for her to explain her existence. I don't know anymore, she whispered. So quietly the microphones barely picked it up. But the cameras caught everything. The way her face crumpled, the tears that started flowing, the way she gripped the podium like it was the only real thing in a world of lies. Steve Harvey had hosted thousands of episodes. He'd seen contestants struggle with difficult questions, seen them get emotional, seen them freeze under pressure. But this was different. This wasn't about winning or losing anymore. He set down his cards and walked towards Sarah. Not the measured walk of a television host, maintaining show pace, but the urgent stride of a human being, recognizing someone in existential crisis. The studio fell silent as all protocols were abandoned. Sarah, Steve said softly, reaching the podium. What's going on? Talk to me. Behind the scenes, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She looked up at Steve, tears streaming down her face, and let the truth pour out. I found out I was adopted last year, she said, her voice breaking. 25 years of thinking I knew who I was. And it was all a lie. I don't know who my real parents are. I don't know where I come from. The words echoed across the studio like a confession. Audience members shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the pain of someone whose foundation had been destroyed. Camera operators continued filming, knowing they were witnessing something beyond entertainment. I don't know if anything about me is real, Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger through the tears. My personality, my interests, my talents, are they mine or did I just copy them from people who aren't even related to me? The studio was completely silent. Steve Harvey, who had built a career on quick responses and perfect timing, found himself in territory no game show had ever prepared him for. This wasn't television anymore. This was someone's identity dissolving in real time. Sarah, Steve said, his voice stripped of all performance. How did you find out? The question was gentle, giving her permission to tell the story that had been eating at her for months. Medical emergency, Sarah whispered. Needed family medical history. That's when they told me I was adopted from Korea when I was 6 months old. Her hands trembled as she spoke. Jessica was crying now, standing at the family podium, watching her sister finally speak the words that had created distance between them for a year. She had watched Sarah pull away from everyone, questioning every relationship, every memory. Steve looked at Jessica, then back at Sarah. In that moment, he understood something profound about the difference between nature and nurture, between blood family and chosen family. And how did that make you feel? He asked gently. Like everything was fake, Sarah replied. Like I was living someone else's life. Like the people I called mom and dad were just strangers who felt sorry for me. The pain in her voice was devastating to hear. Do you love them less now? Steve asked, cutting straight to the heart of her confusion. Sarah looked toward her family, then back at Steve, wrestling with emotions she couldn't untangle. I don't know how to love them the same way, she said honestly. How do you love people who lied to you for 25 years? How do you trust anything when the biggest thing about your life wasn't true? Steve Harvey had made people laugh for decades. But in this moment, he learned something about the difference between entertaining people and helping them rebuild their sense of self. He did something unprecedented in television history. He walked around the podium and gently took Sarah's hands in his. "Sarah, I want you to look at me," he said. "Look right into my eyes and tell me what you see." She looked up, confusion mixing with tears. "I see someone who cares about me," she whispered. "Good," Steve replied. "Now I want you to think about something. Did your parents' love for you feel real before you knew you were adopted?" Sarah nodded slowly. "It felt like the most real thing in the world." "And what changed about that love when you found out the truth?" Steve pressed gently. "Nothing," Sarah admitted, the realization hitting her as she spoke. "The love didn't change, just my understanding of it." "That's right," Steve continued. "Love isn't about DNA, Sarah. It's about choice. Your parents chose you before they even met you." But Steve wasn't finished. He turned to address the entire studio. "Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah just taught us something important about identity. About what makes a family real, about the difference between biology and love." His voice carried across the studio with conviction. "She's been carrying this burden alone, thinking that finding out she was adopted somehow made her less real, less loved, less part of the family that raised her." The audience began to respond. Not with applause, but with recognition. Many people were nodding, some wiping tears, touched by the honesty of someone questioning everything they thought they knew about themselves. "Sarah," Steve continued, turning back to her. "You asked who you are really. I can tell you exactly who you are. You're a young woman who was chosen by people who wanted to love you. You're someone who cares so much about truth that discovering a lie broke your heart. You're someone brave enough to stand on this stage and admit you don't have all the answers. You're someone whose identity was shaped by 25 years of love, not by 6 months in an orphanage." Sarah was sobbing now, but the tears felt different. They weren't just tears of confusion anymore. They were tears of recognition, of beginning to understand that identity could be chosen rather than just inherited. "But I still don't know who my birth parents are," Sarah whispered. "I don't know my real medical history, my ethnic background, my genetic heritage. Half of me is missing." "Sarah," Steve replied firmly, "your birth parents gave you life, but your real parents gave you everything that came after. They gave you your values, your sense of humor, your kindness, your strength. That's not missing, that's right here." He gestured toward her family. "Jessica didn't become less your sister when you found out you were adopted. Your parents didn't become less your parents. You didn't become less their daughter. Biology doesn't define family. Love does." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Without explanation, he dialed a number while the cameras continued rolling. The conversation was brief, conducted in whispers that only Sarah could hear. When he finished, he looked back at her with something approaching hope. "Sarah, I just spoke to some friends of mine, people who help adoptees connect with their heritage while strengthening bonds with their adoptive families. You don't have to choose between your birth culture and your chosen family. You can honor both. You can learn about where you came from without forgetting who raised you." The Rodriguez family, who had been watching this unfold from their podium, abandoned their competitive position entirely. They walked across the stage and surrounded Sarah, their opponents becoming her support system in a matter of minutes. "You know what?" Steve announced to the studio. "Both families win today. Because today we learned something more valuable than any prize money could teach us." He looked directly into the main camera. "We learned that identity isn't just about where you come from. It's about who loves you, who shapes you, who chooses to be part of your story. Family isn't just blood. Family is commitment." The audience rose to their feet. Not in the programmed applause of a television taping, but in genuine recognition of truth they had just witnessed. Sarah stood surrounded by strangers who had become family, held up by love that transcended biology. But the most powerful moment was yet to come. Steve removed his suit jacket, the one he wore for every taping, and gently placed it around Sarah's shoulders. "This jacket has been with me through every show," he said. "It's seen families of all kinds, biological families, adoptive families, chosen families, But today, it's going to wrap around someone who just remembered that love makes family real, not DNA. The jacket was warm and substantial, making Sarah feel grounded in a way she hadn't experienced since learning the truth about her adoption. It felt like being claimed, like being chosen, like belonging somewhere again. As the cameras stopped rolling and the audience began to file out, something unprecedented happened. People didn't leave immediately. They approached Sarah one by one, sharing their own stories of adoption, of family secrets, of questioning identity. A man who had found his birth parents at 40, a woman who had been raised by grandparents, a teenager in foster care who had found family in unexpected places. Each person who spoke to Sarah added another thread to a tapestry of belonging she hadn't known existed. Steve stayed with her through it all. This wasn't publicity or show business. This was community forming around shared understanding of what family really means. Proof that love transcends biology. The episode aired 4 months later, exactly as it had been filmed. No editing to soften Sarah's identity crisis. No removing of the hard questions she had asked. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Adoption agencies reported increased interest from prospective parents. Support groups for adult adoptees saw membership surge. But most importantly, families began having honest conversations about love, choice, and what really makes people related. Sarah reconnected with her heritage through cultural classes and support groups for Korean adoptees. But more importantly, she rebuilt her relationship with the family that had raised her, understanding finally that they were her real family. The business card Steve had given her led to resources that helped her navigate the complex emotions of adoption. Counseling that helped her separate identity from biology. A community of people who understood that being chosen can be more powerful than being born. Steve's jacket became a symbol she shared with other adoptees struggling with identity. She wore it to her first meeting with birth family information, where she learned about her heritage while remembering who had shaped her character. A year later, Sarah had an answer to Steve's question. She was someone who had been chosen by love, shaped by sacrifice, and defined by the people who had committed to her story before they even knew her name. She learned that identity isn't just about genetic heritage. It's about the values instilled by people who chose to love you. About the memories created by family who saw potential in you before you could even speak. Today, Sarah works with adoption agencies, helping families navigate the complex emotions that come with building family through choice, rather than chance. She tells them about the day she learned that being chosen is more powerful than being born. Steve Harvey still keeps a photo from that day in his dressing room. Not a professional shot, but a candid moment of Sarah surrounded by strangers who had become family. It reminds him that sometimes the most important television happens when people rediscover who they really are. The studio audience from that day formed an informal support network that continues to this day. They check on each other during identity crises, offer support during family reunions, and prove that witnessing someone's truth creates lasting bonds. Sarah's story proves that identity crisis can become identity clarity. That discovering you were adopted doesn't make you less real. It makes you twice loved. That family isn't about blood, it's about the people who choose to shape your story every single day. Because Sarah Kim wasn't just a Korean baby who was adopted. She was a daughter who was chosen, a sister who was welcomed, a young woman who was loved unconditionally by people who saw her potential before she could even walk. And that kind of love, that kind of choosing, creates identity that no secret can destroy.